Hi, I'm Betty. My sister called the police on me over a misunderstanding she created, just to make me look unfit as a mother. She said I was unstable, dangerous, all because I wouldn't keep babysitting her daughter for free. And my mom, she let it happen, even signed over her medical power of attorney without telling me. Then came the group texts, the edited videos, the wedding I wasn't invited to. How did I go from being the one who held this family together to the villain in a story I didn't even write? And what do you do when your family's version of loyalty is silence, but you finally find your voice? Would you still show up, or would you walk away too? It was just past 7 in the morning. The drizzle hadn't let up all night, and it lingered like a whisper on the front steps as I stood outside with a steaming mug, waiting for my son to finish tying his shoes. Thursdays were predictable. Zinnia watched my boy before school, and on Mondays I watched her daughter. That was the deal. Unwritten, unspoken, most days, but followed like gospel. We weren't just sisters, we were partners in a quiet rhythm of care. The car door slammed, snapping me out of my daze. I gave my son a quick kiss on the head, helped him into the back seat, and we made our usual 10-minute drive to Zinnia's place. Her driveway looked the same, pristine, like a magazine cover. Her porch plants never died, and the paint on her door never chipped. I parked, waved toward the bay window, and she responded with the usual nod and raised coffee mug. She didn't come outside. She rarely did. That wasn't unusual. Still, something about the way her blinds fell back into place a second too soon left me with a faint itch under my skin. That afternoon, while waiting in the pickup line at my son's school, I checked Instagram and saw her latest post, a filtered selfie with her daughter, both of them dressed like they were headed to brunch at the Four Seasons. Sister goals? Blessed, the caption read. Funny how people post what they wish was true, not what is. I scrolled past it, suppressing the urge to roll my eyes. I'd spent the morning preparing meals for the next few days, juggling calls with my clients, and making sure Mom's prescriptions were ready. Meanwhile, Zinnia was posting curated snippets that looked like a Hallmark ad. I told myself it didn't matter, but then again, I'd been telling myself that for years. The next day, I asked her if she could take Mom to her cardiology appointment. I had a conflict with work and figured she wouldn't mind. She'd taken her before. Zinnia didn't look up from her phone. Can't you just take a day off like I do all the time? Her tone sliced sharper than the words. She didn't even glance at me, just kept scrolling, her thumb flicking through someone else's highlight reel. I stood there in her kitchen, holding the appointment card like an idiot. I didn't say anything. I just tucked the card back into my purse and left. But something about that moment stuck with me longer than it should have. When someone you love starts treating your effort like a burden, that's not just unfair. That's dangerous. Later that night, while sautéing vegetables for dinner, I found myself zoning out, thinking about all the times Zinnia had asked for help, and I'd shown up without hesitation. No questions, no strings. I'd rearranged meetings, canceled vacations, missed more sleep than I cared to admit. And yet, somehow, I'd become the inconvenience. There was that time at Mom's birthday where she thanked Zinnia for the cake I baked, or the fundraiser where Zinnia stood up to speak and listed every relative in the room, except me. My hands moved on autopilot, dicing carrots, while my mind replayed every slight that once felt small but now seemed intentional. I wasn't looking for praise, but I sure as hell didn't deserve to be invisible. The next morning, I dropped my son at Zinnia's again. He ran up the walkway, waved back at me, and disappeared inside. Zinnia didn't open the door herself. Her daughter did. Zinnia waved from inside, her face barely visible between curtain slats. The drive to work felt longer than usual. There was a weird pressure in my chest, like I'd forgotten something important. I brushed it off. Maybe I was overthinking things. But that night, as I settled into bed, my phone buzzed with a text. 10:48 p.m. We should talk. You crossed a line. I sat upright, heart pounding. What line? What the hell was she talking about? I reread it 3 times. No emojis, no context. Just that sentence, cold and final. I didn't know it yet, but that text was the first domino, and it would knock down everything I thought I understood about family. I didn't sleep much after that message. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, scrolling through our old text, looking for a clue, a trigger, anything that might explain what Zinnia meant. You crossed a line? It made no sense, but I figured we'd talk the next day. I'd call, we'd argue a little, then move on like we always had. I was wrong. Friday morning started like any other. I got my son ready for school, packed his snack, checked his reading log. By 7:30 we were out the door. The sky was heavy, clouds pressing low against the treetops as we pulled into Zinnia's driveway. She opened the front door just long enough for my son to slip inside, then gave her usual half wave. I waved back, tried to smile. Still no words. By 7:45, I was on the highway, heading into the city. The drive to the center where I work is usually 40 minutes, sometimes more with traffic. I let a podcast play in the background while I mentally prepared for the day, scheduling intakes, prepping notes, checking my caseload. When I parked and finally checked my phone, I froze. 17 missed calls, 23 messages, all from Zinnia. The last one stopped my breath cold. If you're not back in 45 mins, I'm calling the cops. I remember reading it once, then again, and again. What? My hands started shaking as I called her, heart pounding in my ears. No answer. I texted. Still nothing. I grabbed my bag and told my supervisor I had a family emergency. She nodded, eyes wide with concern. I didn't explain. I couldn't. I barely made it back to my car before the tears started. I drove like I was being chased. I don't even remember the traffic lights. When I pulled up in front of Zinnia's house, I knew I was too late. 2 squad cars were parked outside. Their lights weren't flashing anymore, but their presence was enough. And there, on the porch, stood my son, alone, confused, holding his backpack like a shield. I slammed the car into park and rushed up the steps. My boy's eyes lit up, but there was fear behind his relief. Zinnia stood beside the officers, arms crossed, looking like she'd just filed a tax return, not called law enforcement on her own sister. She abandoned him here, she told them. I wasn't even supposed to have him today. I turned to the officers, trying to steady my breath. My phone was on silent. I didn't see the messages. I dropped him off like I always do. She didn't say anything, didn't even mention a problem. The older officer looked at me, unreadable. So you didn't check your phone before leaving your child? I didn't think I had to, I said, voice tight. It's been the same routine for over a year. Zinnia chimed in, sweet as syrup. If she cared, she would have checked. This is about the children. It's always about the children. I stared at her. No, this is about control. Eventually, they let me take my son. No charges. Just a warning. This could have gone a very different way, one officer told me. I nodded, clutching my son's hand. When I got home, I made him lunch and turned on his favorite cartoon. He asked me what happened, and I lied. I said Zinnia got confused, that we'd figure it out, that grown-ups sometimes make mistakes too. Then I went into the kitchen to make dinner and nearly sliced my finger in half because my hands wouldn't stop trembling. She knew what she was doing. She didn't care if it ruined me. My job depends on trust, on credibility. I work with families, kids in crisis. The words child abandonment on my record, even unofficially, could destroy everything I've built. Later that evening, I got another text from her. Next time, check your phone. You got lucky. Lucky. I saved the message, not for revenge, for record keeping. Because now, this wasn't just sibling drama or a misunderstanding. This was war. And I'd been too blind to see the first shot was already fired. By Sunday afternoon, I had convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe Zinnia had a breakdown. Maybe she regretted it. Maybe, God help me, I'd find some version of the sister I used to believe in. I packed up a few groceries for Mom and told my son we were stopping by Grandma's house. He was excited. That made one of us. When we pulled into the driveway, I noticed Zinnia's SUV already parked out front. That wasn't part of the plan. I hadn't been told she'd be there. But I told myself I could handle it. We were adults. I'd keep it civil. Inside, the house smelled like lemon polish, and the roast Mom always overcooked. My son ran off to find his toy bin in the den while I brought the groceries into the kitchen. That's when I saw them. Zinnia at the table, arms folded like she was holding court, and Mom across from her, wringing her hands around a mug she hadn't touched. Zinnia looked up but didn't say hello. Mom offered a forced smile. "We need to stop this tension, Betty." Tension. Like I was the one creating it. I stayed standing. "Sure, let's stop it." Mom's voice tightened. "Zinnia didn't mean harm. You know how emotional she gets. But you dropping your son off without checking first. It looked bad. Really bad." Zinnia didn't speak. She didn't need to. She'd already told her story. It wasn't about what actually happened. It was about who got to speak first. And Zinnia had already filled in the blanks. I looked at Mom. "You know how we've done this for years. Nothing changed, except her reaction." "She said she wasn't feeling well that day," Mom replied quietly. "She said nothing to me." Zinnia let out a soft, sarcastic laugh. "You always act like communication is a one-way street. Maybe if you weren't so high-strung, things wouldn't escalate." "Right," I said, "because nothing says de-escalation like calling the police." That shut the room down. For a moment. Then Mom, avoiding my eyes, changed the subject entirely. "Betty, would you mind covering the grocery tab this week? Zinnia's, well, she's overwhelmed. Between jobs. And it's been hard since the incident." That word again. Like it was an accident, a fluke. Like she hadn't orchestrated it. I nodded. Out of habit, out of instinct, out of exhaustion. Later that week, I sat on the porch while my son napped inside. The breeze carried the scent of grass clippings and gasoline from a neighbor's mower. I opened Instagram out of boredom. Big mistake. There she was, Zinnia, in a coral-wrapped dress, sipping a mimosa in a trendy downtown brunch spot. "Self-care is how I keep going," the caption read. "Not everyone will understand your journey." My stomach tightened. I flipped to my banking app. The shared card I used for Mom's groceries had 3 charges from that same day. Brunch, boutique, and something labeled Spa Skin Glow. She used my kindness as a credit line. And Mom let her. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, letting it all sink in. This wasn't about a bad week or a misstep. This was about narrative. Zinnia was writing one where I was cold, unstable, selfish, and she was the devoted daughter barely hanging on, and I was paying for the props. I closed the app, my breath calm but deliberate, walked inside, locked the door, went into my office, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in years. The label was simple: Documentation, Zinnia. Inside were old texts, receipts, screenshots, emails I never deleted, things that never felt important until now. Back then, I saved them out of caution. Now they were evidence. I placed the brunch screenshot on top. "This isn't about groceries," I whispered. "This is about being erased with my own money." I slid the folder shut. It's one thing to be lied about. It's another to foot the bill for it. I didn't sleep much that week. Something had shifted. Quietly, deliberately. I went through the motions: work, school drop-offs, the occasional text from Mom that felt more like checking a box than genuine connection. Zinnia didn't say a word after the brunch incident, and in some ways, that silence was more unnerving than any insult she could have thrown my way. Midweek, I stopped by Mom's house to help clean out the office. She'd asked for help sorting paperwork, old tax returns, medical receipts, the kind of chore Zinnia always avoided but somehow still took credit for. While Mom sat in the den folding towels, I worked my way through stacks of envelopes and half-labeled folders. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just trying to keep my hands busy. That's when I found it. Tucked behind a folder of utility bills, barely folded, was a printed copy of her will. I recognized the header, the notary stamp. But what made my stomach turn was the section I remembered all too well. The part where I had once been listed as primary caregiver and executor. My name had been crossed out. In pen. Not even reprinted. Just a single line drawn through me, like I was an item on a shopping list no longer needed. And beneath that, in neat cursive, Zinnia's name. I stared at the paper, letting the weight of it settle. Not rage, not sadness, just clarity. I didn't make a sound. I pulled out my phone, angled it discreetly, and took a photo. Then I slid the paper back exactly where I found it. Same fold, same depth in the pile. Nothing to suggest I had ever seen it. Panic is how they win. Receipts are how you survive. That Friday, we had dinner at Aunt Marion's. A casual thing, family-style lasagna, paper plates, plastic forks, and Zinnia in her favorite linen jumpsuit, acting like she hadn't tried to burn me to the ground. I didn't want to cause a scene, but I wasn't interested in playing along either. While she poured herself another glass of red, I asked, almost offhandedly, "Hey, when did Mom decide to change the will?" She looked up, eyes narrowing just a beat too long before the smile returned. "Oh, that? You're reading too much into everything. It's just a precaution. You're always so sensitive." Sensitive. That word, again, weaponized and polished. I sipped my water. Sensitive is how people like you say, "Don't ask questions." Her mouth tightened, but she didn't respond. And I didn't push. Later that night, I sat with Mom in her kitchen. Zinnia had already left, claiming she was tired from managing everything. I leaned against the counter and chose my words carefully. "Did you mean to leave me out of the will?" I asked gently. She blinked. "Zinnia said she'd handle the legal stuff. I didn't want to make it complicated." "You didn't even tell me." Her hands trembled slightly as she folded the napkin in her lap. I thought it would be easier." Easier? For whom? She didn't look up, and I didn't press further. In the quiet of my car later, I sat at a red light, the kind that lasts just long enough to think about everything you've ever let slide. I pulled out my phone and stared at the photo again. The will, the ink, the erasure. She didn't even ask me. They just removed me like I was never there. And yet I still kept showing up. Still kept carrying groceries, covering bills, being the invisible backbone to a story I was no longer written into. A few years ago, after her minor surgery, Mom had whispered through anesthesia, "If anything happens, you'll know what to do. You're the strong one, Betty." I guess strong meant expendable. They want to pretend I was never here. Let's see how they handle when I don't disappear. I document. Friday morning arrived heavy, not with rain or gray skies, but with something thicker, resignation. The kind you feel deep in your shoulders, like you're about to carry something for the last time, and you already know it's going to leave a mark. At 7:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Zinnia, can you take her today? I have a client call at 9, and she's still coughing." No, please. No context. No apology for everything that had come before. Just another assumption, like always. I stared at the screen for a moment, then walked into my son's room and helped him finish packing his lunch. On the counter sat the spare backpack I kept for Zinnia's daughter, stocked with crayons, tissues, and snacks I'd bought out of habit, not duty. Even when they burn you, part of you wants to prove you're not made of fire. I texted back, "Bring her over." An hour later, her daughter sat cross-legged in my living room, humming softly while building a castle out of magnetic tiles. I folded laundry beside her, half listening, half processing. My mind kept replaying that printed will, my name scratched out like a typo. "I wish you were my real mommy," the girl said suddenly. I turned to her. "Why do you say that, sweetheart?" "Because you talk nice, and you smell like cookies." I smiled. A soft, painful thing. "Well, I'm just Auntie Betty, and that's pretty special too." But the air shifted. I knew those words would echo. Around noon, I made her grilled cheese and cut it diagonally the way she liked. She told me I made the best lunches, told me she hated when her mom forgot her water bottle, told me I folded the blanket the right way. At 12:47, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Zinnia in oversized sunglasses and workout gear that looked more expensive than functional. She didn't smile. Her daughter ran to hug her. "Mommy! Auntie Betty says I'm getting really good at spelling." Zinnia's mouth twitched. Her eyes flicked to me, cold. "Ready to go?" she said, but not to me. I handed her the backpack. "She was great today." Zinnia nodded once, lips tight. She didn't say thank you, didn't say anything. 2 hours later, my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. "Don't ever put words in my daughter's mouth." Then another. "You're turning her against me." And one more. "You need to know your place." I didn't respond right away. I sat with those messages. Let them sting. Let them fester. Then I typed a single line. "This was the last time I watched your daughter. You no longer have access to me." Then I blocked her. It wasn't petty, it was preservation. Over the next 2 days, my phone stayed quiet. Until it didn't. A DM popped up from a mutual friend. "Hey, are you okay? Zinnia's been saying some heavy stuff." Another message followed. "Just wanted to check in. She's posting weird things about you." I clicked over to her profile. There it was. A vague but pointed post. "Some people pretend to care about your child just to feel important. Protect your peace." She wasn't just cutting me out. She was painting over me. She was rewriting the narrative again, casting herself as the overwhelmed single mom and me as the bitter, interfering sister who didn't know boundaries. Then a forwarded message landed in my inbox. Group chat, screenshot. Zinnia, in her own words. "She's dangerous. I don't want her near my daughter again." I read it twice, then again. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked to the kitchen, opened my laptop, created a new folder. Label, Zinnia Digital Evidence. Then I sat down and began. By the end of that week, I had nearly memorized the layout of my Zinnia Digital Evidence folder. Receipts, screenshots, timestamps. Her voice, my silence. The digital dust of a story she never thought I'd track. I wasn't angry anymore. I was alert. So when Mom invited me over for a quiet family dinner that Sunday, I hesitated. But I said yes. Because saying no would have felt like giving up territory I hadn't agreed to surrender. I baked a casserole. My signature one. The one they always requested when things were normal. My son came with me, carrying a bag of his old action figures to play with in the den. We pulled into the driveway, and I knew immediately something was off. Zinnia's car was already there. So were Aunt Cheryl's and Uncle Dean's. Even my cousin Jamie, who hadn't shown up to anything since Grandpa's funeral, was standing on the porch sipping something out of a red Solo cup. Inside, the house was lit with too much warmth, too much effort, too much preparation for what was supposed to be casual. Everyone was already seated. Even the lasagna was plated. "Come in," Mom said, a little too cheerfully. "We just want to clear the air." My stomach dropped. I wasn't here for dinner. I was here for sentencing. I took the only open seat across from Zinnia, who barely glanced at me. She had that look, smooth, composed, like she'd been rehearsing something and was finally ready to deliver it. "We're concerned about your recent behavior, Betty," she said, folding her hands. "Are you?" I replied, eyebrows raised. "I know things have been tense," she continued, "but your messages, the way you've been around my daughter, it's felt aggressive, confusing." I looked around the room. Mom stared down at her napkin. Aunt Cheryl nodded sympathetically. Jamie looked lost. "This isn't a dinner," I said. "This is a tribunal. Who decided this was the way to handle things?" Mom tried to interject. "No one's attacking anyone." "Then why am I the only one who didn't know this was happening?" I asked, voice low but steady. There was a silence, a familiar kind. The kind that comes when people are pretending it's not about you, while they organize the firing squad behind your back. Zinnia pressed on. You crossed lines, Betty, telling my daughter things that confuse her, undermining how I raise her. You mean being present? I said. She shook her head, fake pity oozing. It's about boundaries. No, I thought. It's about erasure. I didn't fight. I didn't cry. I let them talk. I watched them pass a microphone made of assumptions, each one politely confirming the script they'd been given. When I got home that night, I sat in the dark for a long time. My son was asleep. The house was still. My hands, finally, not. I opened Instagram not out of impulse, but curiosity. And there it was, Zinnia's latest post from earlier that day. While I was in the kitchen helping Mom chop onions, she had been at a spa downtown, sipping white wine on a balcony. Caption: When you give everything and still get blamed, take the afternoon for yourself. Cirque healing. I stared at it, then took a screenshot. Time-stamped, geotagged, saved. Let them have their rehearsed lines. I'll stick to facts. The next morning, Lorraine showed up at my door unannounced. She brought a bag of muffins from the bakery she knew I liked. I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table. I just wanted to check in, she said. Yesterday was heavy. You mean organized? She didn't argue. I got up, walked to the drawer, and slid the printed screenshot across the table. Zinnia, wine glass, that same hour she claimed to be with Mom at an appointment. Mom picked up the paper, glanced at it. She said nothing. You asked me to trust your judgment, I said softly. But what if your judgment is what's hurting us all? The house was still when I got the call. Tuesday morning, just past 9:10 a.m., right after I'd dropped off my son and was settling into my office with my second cup of coffee. It was Lisa, an old friend from college, the kind who rarely called unless something mattered. I don't know if you've seen this, she said, low and hesitant, but someone forwarded me a group chat, and, Betty, it's bad. Zinnia's saying you crossed boundaries with that guy you dated before her. She's implying you were predatory. I sat very still. Predatory? She's not using the word, Lisa said quickly, but she's painting the picture. You came on to him when they were together, said you couldn't let go, said you texted him recently, which I know can't be true. My heart didn't pound. It sunk. Because this wasn't just about family now. She was going after my character, one twisted word at a time. She wasn't just smearing my name, I whispered after I hung up. She was rewriting my entire character. By noon, the ripple had reached the edges of our community. Anonymous posts popped up in a neighborhood Facebook group I'd once helped moderate. Be careful who you trust with your kids. Some people offer help for the wrong reasons. Watch out for the ones who look too perfect on the outside. No names, just enough implication that anyone who'd heard the gossip would connect the dots. I didn't reply. I didn't react. But that night, another blow landed. A former coworker sent me a link. Betty, you need to see this. I opened the video, grainy, shot from a corner of Aunt Cheryl's living room. It was footage from the family dinner, if you could call it that, the ambush. But it had been chopped, edited to hell. My voice clipped mid-sentence. My face caught in an unflattering angle. Zinnia sitting across from me looking calm, while I looked unstable. It made me seem like I was yelling, confrontational, like I'd come to destroy, not defend. The full version, gone. She didn't need to yell to hurt me, I murmured. She just had to edit. By Thursday, whispers reached my workplace. The HR director asked to check in. Her tone was syrupy but strained. We've been informed of concerning online content, she said, sliding a printout across the table. And comments in local forums. We just want to make sure you're okay, that your emotional state isn't affecting your work. I looked her dead in the eye. Would you like to see the original footage, or the full version of the text thread this was pulled from? She blinked. You have that? Of course I do. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. In that case, I'd like to request you submit a summary for record. I nodded. Calm. Professional. But inside, a fire had settled into my bones. Not rage, resolve. That night, I reopened the file on my laptop. This time, I renamed it. Zinnia, False Narratives. I added the full-length video I'd managed to retrieve from Jamie, who'd quietly sent it after the ambush. Screenshots of Zinnia's spa trip, geotagged and time-stamped. The text from Lisa. My original conversation with the ex-boyfriend Zinnia now claimed I had pursued. And then, as if fate knew I needed one more match to strike, I got a message from him. Betty, I don't know what she's saying now, but I know you didn't cross any line. She's done this before. With her roommate in college. With that coworker in Denver. You're not the first person she's tried to rewrite. I stared at the screen. Then, I whispered to the quiet room. So it wasn't just me she rewrote. By the time Saturday rolled around, I was ready. Not angry, not hopeful, just ready. Lorraine had invited us to brunch. Just us girls, she said over the phone, as if the week hadn't unraveled in plain view. Zinnia would be there, along with our 2 cousins. Casual, she'd added, but I knew better. So I arrived late, on purpose. I walked in calm, no makeup, hair pulled back, wearing my most unremarkable outfit. I carried 2 things, a small Bluetooth speaker in my bag and an envelope under my arm. The living room was arranged like it had been staged. Flowers in a glass vase, plates of croissants and fruit that no one had touched. Lorraine was sitting stiffly on the edge of her armchair, glancing nervously at Zinnia, who looked relaxed, like she was about to perform. And perform she did. I've been thinking a lot, Zinnia said the moment I sat down, about what we've all been through. And I just want to say I forgive you, Betty. Her voice was smooth, measured. She looked around the room like she was addressing a jury. Not family. I hope we can move forward, she added, placing a hand dramatically over her heart. For Mom. For the kids. I didn't react, not even a blink. I reached into my bag and pulled out the speaker. I don't need your forgiveness, I said. I need the truth in the room. I pressed play. At first, just background noise. The faint hum of the refrigerator. A creak of a floorboard. Then her voice. She's too soft. She'll fold eventually. We'll make her irrelevant. Just keep her off the will. Silence. Lorraine let out a sharp breath. One cousin muttered, Jesus! Zinnia's eyes widened. That was taken out of context. I didn't respond. I tapped the speaker again. Second clip. It's almost done. She's barely around anymore. She's practically erased herself. I set the envelope on the coffee table, opened it slowly, and handed Lorraine the printed transcript. You told people I was a danger, I said quietly. But this is what danger sounds like. Quiet, calculated, family-shaped. No one moved. Lorraine's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the pages. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Zinnia stood abruptly. You're not family anymore, she spat. I finished my tea, placed the mug gently on its saucer. Then stop using me like one. She stormed out, heels clicking down the hallway like gunfire. The front door slammed. I stood and smoothed my sweater. One cousin said softly, I had no idea. Lorraine looked up at me, eyes glassy. I don't know what to say. Then maybe, I said, gathering my things, it's time you stop speaking for everyone, and listen. The house smelled like dust and lemon cleaner, an odd pairing that had come to define Lorraine's kitchen. It was nearly a week since the brunch, since the recording, since Zinnia had erupted and the cracks in the family facade finally split wide open. I wasn't there to stir anything. I just wanted to check on my mother. She greeted me at the door like nothing had happened. Small talk, awkward smiles, the usual script. But her voice was quieter, more careful, as if she wasn't sure what version of me she'd invited in. We moved through the kitchen, and I offered to put the groceries away while she sorted some bills at the table. She gestured to the counter, distracted, thumbing through envelopes. Her pile was mostly unopened. One envelope caught my eye. Cream-colored, thick stock, return address from a local law office. I said nothing. I opened the cabinet above the sink, looking for a glass, and instead found a folder stuffed between two outdated cans of soup. It wasn't labeled, but I recognized the notary seal peeking out from the edge. Curious, I slid it out and unfolded it. My heart didn't drop. It didn't need to, because I'd stopped being surprised. The paper inside was a notarized power of attorney, granting Zinnia full control over Lorraine's finances, medical decisions, and assets in the event of diminished capacity. I wasn't mentioned. Not as a secondary, not as a backup, just omitted. I took a breath, walked back to the table, and set the document down between us. Lorraine glanced at it, her eyes flinching the moment they recognized the header. "Zinnia said it was just precaution," she mumbled. "In case I get worse." I looked at her. "You didn't think I deserved to know? I'm the one picking up your prescriptions. I'm the one who took off work to drive you to your last appointment." She couldn't meet my eyes. "It's not about that. She said it would help pay bills, keep things simple." "You think signing over everything to someone who lies with the same breath she praises you is simple?" She looked down again. And I realized something I hadn't admitted before. It wasn't just that Zinnia lied. It was that Lorraine allowed it. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a family group text. "Mom had a fall," Zinnia wrote, "in the hallway. If Betty hadn't withdrawn so coldly, maybe she would have been there." It wasn't said with concern. It was a dagger wrapped in silk. I didn't respond. Not immediately. Instead, I drove to Lorraine's. She had a bruise on her wrist, a slight limp, and a pile of ice packs on the couch. But she downplayed everything, said she tripped over a magazine. "Are you okay?" I asked genuinely. She nodded, eyes darting. "Zinnia says you've been distant." I didn't flinch. I stepped back to protect myself, not to endanger you. That was her choice, not mine. At church that Sunday, I overheard whispers. In the restroom, someone said, "She left her own mother alone, all out of spite." Another woman offered a cautious glance as we passed in the hallway. "You should defend yourself, dear." I gave a tight smile. "I don't need to yell to be right," I said, "but I will speak when it matters most." And by Monday, I did. Not to the family, not to the church, but to Kevin, a college friend turned estate attorney. He called after I sent a brief message with one sentence. "I need help documenting what's real." "I saw the clip," he said. "I saw the post. You don't need to fight loud, Betty, but you do need to fight smart, and I can help." I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly, my hand resting on the worn edge of the folder I'd built from years of being quiet. She signed away Mom's rights with a pen. Let's see how she handles one used for justice. The envelope was thick, heavy in a way that didn't match the rest of the mail I pulled from the box that morning. I flipped it over in my hand as I walked back inside, reading the return address twice before I realized what it was. Kara Sanderson's wedding. We'd grown up side by side, gone to the same summer camps, worn matching dresses at each other's birthdays. She'd even asked me to be her emergency contact once when she had her wisdom teeth pulled. I smiled, remembering all that, until I noticed the address line. Ms. Lorraine Myers plus guest, C.O. Zinnia Moore. My name wasn't there. Inside, the RSVP card listed Zinnia and Lorraine as honored guests. Me? Not even an afterthought. I sat down at the kitchen table, the paper trembling slightly in my hand. Maybe it was a mix-up, a technicality. Maybe Kara assumed I'd respond through Mom. Or maybe, no. I knew exactly what this was. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I sent her a text, short and light. "Hey Kara, just got your invite. Looks like it came through Mom's address. Wanted to make sure nothing got lost in the shuffle." Her reply came within minutes. "Hey Betty, I'm so sorry. Zinnia mentioned you were taking a step back, emotionally. She said you might not want to be included right now, but we'd love to have you if you're up for it. My stomach clenched. She rewrote me out of places she wasn't even part of. That night, I skipped dinner. I poured a glass of water, stared at the sink, and tried to swallow the lump in my throat. 3 days later, a knock on the door broke the stillness of a quiet afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, Marvella stood on my porch, holding a small stack of papers and her sun hat in her hand. She lived 4 houses down. A quiet widow, spent most of her time in her garden. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said softly. "Of course not. Come in." We sat in the living room. She placed the stack on the coffee table. "I've seen things, Betty," she said. "I didn't want to get involved, but I've heard too much. You deserve to know." I reached for the papers, screenshots from a neighborhood message board, comments that danced around my name but didn't have to. "She's unstable. She cut off her mother. Don't invite her to gatherings, it'll cause drama." And then one printed post, signed with Zinnia's handle, not even masked. "We all want peace, but peace can't come from someone who only shows up to tear people down." Marvella looked at me. "They weren't just talking behind your back. They were building a wall and locking the door from their side." I nodded slowly. "Thank you for bringing this." She placed a hand on mine. "I raised 3 daughters. I know what jealousy can look like when it's dressed up as concern." After she left, I opened my laptop. I pulled up the same board, typed a single paragraph. "If you've heard my name, ask yourself who repeated it and why they needed you to believe it before they let me speak." Then I turned off comments, logged out. I don't need applause. I need the truth to echo just loud enough to make liars flinch. Later that day, I watched from my kitchen window as a courier walked up Zinnia's path. He rang the doorbell. She answered in workout leggings and a half smile, signed the slip without reading it, then opened the envelope. I didn't need to see her face to know the moment she read it. Letter of intent, civil accountability for defamation and misuse of guardianship rights. I stepped back from the window. Didn't watch the aftermath. Some battles aren't meant to be seen. They're meant to be felt. The next morning was quiet. I'd just come back from the pharmacy, a brown paper bag of Mom's prescriptions in my hand, when I pulled into her driveway. I didn't expect much, just to drop the meds off and check on her bruised wrist. Maybe share a polite cup of tea. I wasn't in the mood for anything deeper. I knocked twice and waited. It wasn't Lorraine who opened the door. It was Zinnia's daughter. She grinned, missing a front tooth, and motioned me in. "Grandma's at her garden club," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "But Mommy said you could stay with me until she gets back." The house felt dimmer without Lorraine, but I stepped inside and followed the little girl to the living room, where she had crayons scattered across the coffee table and a half-colored picture of a unicorn taped to the side lamp. We sat in silence, coloring side by side. 10 minutes passed, maybe 20. Then she looked up, out of nowhere, and said, "You're the mean one, Auntie Betty." I stopped mid-stroke. She kept coloring, unconcerned. "Mommy says you want Grandma to hate her." I didn't speak. I didn't move. My hand hovered above the page, still holding the green crayon. The air in the room shifted, no longer innocent, no longer simple. She didn't know what those words meant. She just knew how they made Zinnia look innocent. I placed the crayon down and smiled softly. "Do you want to finish this picture before lunch?" She nodded. And we did. Quietly. Carefully. Like nothing had happened. I helped her wash up, packed up her toys neatly, and left a note on the counter for Mom. "Medications are in the fridge drawer. See you soon." As I was walking out, Lorraine's car pulled into the driveway. She parked slowly, her face unreadable behind the windshield. I held the door open for her, but didn't step aside. "She repeated your daughter's words like they were scripture," I said as she approached. Lorraine looked down, adjusting the strap of her purse. "Kids don't lie," she murmured. No, I said, but adults put the lies in their mouths. She didn't respond. I reached into my bag, pulled out the spare house key, and placed it on the counter just inside the door. Alongside it, a folded note. This was the last thing tying me to this role. I release it, and you. Some exits aren't explosions. They're just doors quietly closing so peace can finally enter. Later that afternoon, I walked around the neighborhood, once more, not out of habit, but for closure. Some faces looked away when I passed. Others gave me tight smiles, half-hearted, unsure of what they believed anymore. It didn't matter. I didn't need their agreement. I didn't even want their pity. There was something oddly freeing about being misunderstood once you stopped needing to explain yourself. That evening, the phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Lorraine's voice cracked as it started. I think I made a mistake. I didn't mean to choose. I just didn't know how to stop her. I listened until the end. I didn't delete the message, but I didn't call back either. A week after the voicemail, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address. The envelope was hand-sealed, slightly crooked, like someone had rushed to close it before changing their mind. Inside was a note, 2 paragraphs written in a hand I knew better than my own. You were never wrong to protect yourself. I was wrong to believe silence would save us all. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. I stood by the sink holding that letter for a long time, the kettle whistling behind me until it clicked itself off. It wasn't an apology, not fully, but it was the closest Lorraine had ever come. Later that day, I met Kevin in his office. We sat across from each other while he reviewed the latest communication from Zinnia's lawyer. She's backing off, he said, glancing over the top of his glasses. Withdrawn the guardianship rights. Wants to avoid court. Her tones changed completely. I exhaled through my nose. Sometimes you don't need to win in court, he added. You just need them to know you could. I nodded. That's enough. The following weekend, I went to a neighborhood potluck, my first real outing in weeks. I brought lemon bars, the same recipe I used to make for church picnics when Zinnia still smiled at me in public. She wasn't there. Not a word. Not a glare. Not a show. One neighbor walked up to me while I poured lemonade. Funny how things shifted once truth had timestamps, she said, almost under her breath. Another handed me a paper plate. It's good to see you here, really, I smiled. Thanks. It's good to feel seen. Monday morning, I stopped by Lorraine's unannounced, just for 10 minutes. She looked smaller than I remembered. Slower to get up, thinner in the face. I didn't bring up the letter. She didn't either. We sat in silence until she reached out, touched my wrist, and said, "Thank you for still showing up, even when I didn't deserve it." I nodded, stood, and walked to the door. I didn't promise to visit again, and that was okay. Closure isn't a door slamming. It's walking past a house that once held you hostage and feeling nothing. By fall, I'd started a small parenting support group at the community center. Just 5 women at first, each with their own version of betrayal, some by siblings, others by spouses, one by a daughter who'd drained her savings and moved away. I didn't share my story, not at first. I didn't need to. I just listened, until one of them, a woman named Claire, said something that stopped the room. I used to think keeping peace meant keeping quiet, she said, twisting her wedding ring in her fingers. But silence nearly cost me everything. I looked at her, then at the others, and replied gently, "Then maybe you're just starting to speak for the first time." After the meeting, I went home and opened my journal, something I hadn't touched in months. I flipped past the half-filled pages, found a fresh one, and wrote a single line. She called the cops to erase me, but I wrote myself back in, with facts, not forgiveness.